The bridge of the Sovereign's pride hummed with the quiet efficiency that came from 300 years of galactic peace. Captain Thexel stretched his scaled limbs and watched the stars drift past the massive view screen. His reptilian eyes, adapted for the harsh red sun of his homeworld, barely registered the soft blue glow of human space in the distance. The Kepler 442 system belonged to the hegemony now, just like everything else worth having in this part of the galaxy. 6 species had joined together centuries ago to bring order to the chaos of primitive worlds and warring tribes. The Vakari provided military strength. The insectoid chitin brought intelligence networks. 4 other races contributed their own gifts to the great machine of civilization. Another quiet day in paradise, muttered Lieutenant Kavesh from the weapons station. His tongue flicked out to taste the recycled air, finding nothing but the familiar sense of his crewmates and the metallic tang of the ship's systems. Thexel nodded. The hegemony's 3rd Fleet had been patrolling these outer systems for months without incident. Pirates had learned to avoid their routes. Independent colonies had either joined the coalition or been absorbed. The galaxy was finally learning its place in the natural order. Sir, I have something strange on long-range sensors. The voice belonged to sensor operator Creton, a young chitin whose compound eyes never missed the smallest detail. His insect-like head tilted as he studied his displays. Define strange, Thexel said without much interest. In his experience, strange usually meant a broken merchant vessel or some debris from an old battle. Single contact bearing 27 Mark IV. It's small, maybe frigate class, but the construction... Creton's antennae twitched with confusion. I've never seen anything like it. Intelligence Officer Velnara looked up from her station. Unlike the rest of the chitin species, she had evolved for analysis rather than sensory work. Her mind processed information like a living computer. Show me the tactical display. The main screen shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the local space. A single red dot moved through the asteroid field with purpose. The computer's analysis scrolled alongside the image, and Velnara's eyes widened. The hull composition is all wrong, she said slowly. It's made of refined metals, not bio-grown materials. The energy signature suggests primitive fusion reactors, and those weapon mounts... She paused. They look like kinetic launchers. Lieutenant Kavesh laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Kinetic weapons? What is this, the Bronze Age? Who still throws rocks at their enemies? Someone who doesn't know better, Thexel said. But something about the ship's movement patterns bothered him. It wasn't drifting like a lost vessel. It moved with purpose, taking advantage of asteroid shadows and gravitational fields. Almost like it was hunting. Can you identify the species? He asked. Velnara worked at her console for several minutes. The computer has no match in our databases, but I'm picking up electromagnetic communications, very primitive radio waves. The language is unknown, but I'm running it through our translation matrix. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Thexel had been in space long enough to know when something felt wrong. This entire situation had the taste of danger, even though logic said otherwise. A single primitive ship posed no threat to a hegemony dreadnought. Translation coming through now, Velnara announced. The ship's designation appears to be USMC Leatherneck. The species identifies itself as human. The word meant nothing to anyone on the bridge. Thexel searched his memory for any reference to these humans. Nothing came to mind. Check the integration database, he ordered. See if they're scheduled for absorption. Velnara's fingers danced across her console. Found them. Humans. Planet designated Earth, located in what they call the Sol system. Primitive industrial civilization. Recently achieved spaceflight. They're marked for integration in approximately 100 standard years. 100 years? Kavesh shook his head. Why wait so long? Distance, mostly. Their system is on the very edge of explored space. The Hegemony Council decided they weren't worth the resources until we finished consolidating the inner worlds. Thexel studied the human ship on his display. It continued to move through the asteroid field with impossible precision. No computer guidance system should be able to navigate those rocks so smoothly. Either these humans had better technology, Then their files suggested or their pilots were exceptionally skilled. "Sir, they're changing course," Creton reported. "New heading puts them on an intercept course with our patrol route." "Intercept course?" Thexel's tail lashed with irritation. "Are they trying to make contact?" "Unknown. They haven't responded to any of our standard greeting frequencies." Velnara looked up from her analysis. "Captain, there's something else. I've been studying their ship's design. It's not built like an exploration vessel or a merchant ship. The armor plating, the weapon placement, the engine configuration. This is a military vessel." "Military?" Thexel felt his scales tighten with the first hint of real concern. "You're certain?" "The design philosophy is completely different from anything we've seen. Most civilizations build their warships around energy shields and directed energy weapons. This human ship seems designed to absorb physical impact and return kinetic force." Lieutenant Kavesh snorted. "Kinetic force against plasma cannons and particle beams? They might as well be throwing spears at a star." But Velnara wasn't finished. "There's more. I've been analyzing their communication patterns. They're not broadcasting random chatter like most primitive species. Their communications are coded, structured, disciplined. These aren't confused explorers who stumbled into our territory. They know exactly where they are and what they're doing." Thexel felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. In 3 decades of service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming warnings. "Signal the fleet. I want 2 more ships on patrol in this sector within the hour." "Sir?" Creton's compound eyes reflected confusion. "For a single primitive vessel?" "Because that single primitive vessel is behaving like a predator, not prey." Thexel pointed at the tactical display. "Look at its movement pattern. It's not exploring. It's hunting. And the only thing in this system worth hunting is us." The bridge crew exchanged glances. The idea seemed impossible. A primitive species, challenging the hegemony. It went against everything they knew about galactic civilization. Primitive species either begged for membership or were absorbed by force. None had ever been foolish enough to seek out hegemony ships for combat. "Orders, sir?" asked the communications officer. Thexel studied the human ship one more time. It had cleared the asteroid field now and was moving into open space. Direct course for their position. No attempt to hide or avoid contact. If anything, it seemed to be advertising its presence. "Open a channel. Standard first contact protocols. Let's see what these humans want." As the communications officer worked to establish contact, Velnara continued her analysis of the human vessel. The more she learned, the less sense it made. The ship's design suggested a species that had spent considerable time and resources perfecting the art of warfare. But their technology level indicated they should still be learning to build basic spacecraft. "Channel open, sir. This is Captain Thexel of the Hegemony vessel Sovereign's Pride. Unknown ship, you have entered Hegemony space. State your intentions and prepare to be boarded for inspection." The response came immediately. A human face appeared on their view screen, and every member of the bridge crew felt a chill of recognition. Not because they had seen this species before, but because they recognized the expression. It was the look of a predator that had found prey. The human was older, with gray hair and scars that spoke of violence survived. His eyes held no fear, no confusion, no deference. When he smiled, it was the smile of something that enjoyed conflict. Well, the human said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "Looks like we found ourselves some honest-to-God aliens. Intel was right about one thing. You're definitely uglier than we expected." Admiral Zorvak received the transmission from Captain Thexel with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. The aging Vakari had commanded the Third Fleet for 15 years, overseeing the peaceful absorption of dozens of primitive worlds. His scales, now silver with age, bore the scars of the last real conflicts the galaxy had seen. "A single human ship?" he asked, studying the tactical readout on his command screen. "And Thexel is requesting reinforcements?" His aide, a young Chiton named Texara, consulted her data pad. "The captain reports unusual behavior patterns. The human vessel appears to be actively seeking confrontation." Zorvak's laugh rumbled through the bridge of his flagship, the Galactic Harmony. At 4 kilometers long, it was one of the largest ships in hegemony service. Its bio-grown hull gleamed with embedded weapon systems and shield generators. The thought that a primitive vessel might pose any threat to such a ship struck him as absurd. Confrontation? These humans haven't even mastered energy weapons yet. What are they going to do, throw asteroids at us? He paused to consider the strategic situation. Still, first contact with a new species is important. We should handle this properly. The Admiral's experience with primitive species followed a predictable pattern. First came confusion and fear when they encountered hegemony ships, then desperate attempts at communication. Finally, either grateful acceptance of hegemony protection or futile resistance that ended quickly. Signal Captains Morden and Veltesh. Have them converge on Thexel's position. 3 heavy cruisers should be more than enough to convince these humans to see reason. Texara's antennae twitched with uncertainty. Sir, the intelligence files on humans suggest they may be more aggressive than typical primitive species. Their planet shows evidence of extensive warfare. All primitive species fight among themselves. Zorvak dismissed the concern. It's what they do before they learn better. Once they see real military power, they'll understand their place in the galaxy. The Admiral turned his attention to other matters, leaving his staff to coordinate the convergence. In his experience, these situations resolved themselves quickly once the primitives realized what they were facing. 3 hours later, Captain Thexel found himself staring at the human ship with growing unease. The vessel had made no attempt to flee when 2 more hegemony cruisers entered the system. If anything, it seemed to welcome their arrival. Status report. Admiral Zorvak's voice crackled through the communication system. The human ship maintains position approximately 50,000 kilometers from our formation, Thexel replied. They've responded to our hails, but their attitude is unusual. Unusual how? Captain Mordoon's voice joined the conversation from his own ship. Admiral, I've been monitoring their communications. These humans don't seem frightened or confused. They're acting like they want to fight us. Zorvak's patience began to wear thin. Captain Morden, you have the most powerful ship in the sector. Are you telling me you're concerned about a single primitive vessel? Not concerned, sir, just confused by their behavior. Then let me make this simple. Open a channel to the human ship. I'll speak to them directly. The main screen on each hegemony ship flickered to life, showing the same scarred human face that had first appeared to Thexel. But now the man was no longer alone. Behind him, other humans moved with purposeful efficiency. Their clothing appeared to be some kind of military uniform, and their bearing suggested professional soldiers. This is Admiral Zorvak of the Hegemony, 3rd Fleet, the old Vakari announced in his most authoritative voice. You are in violation of hegemony space. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The human's response was not what any of them expected. He threw back his head and laughed. The sound was harsh and filled with genuine mirth, as if the Admiral had told the funniest joke he had ever heard. Admiral, my name is Colonel Marcus Thompson, United States Marine Corps, and you just made my day. The human's grin revealed white teeth that looked disturbingly predatory. Boys, sound general quarters. Looks like we're going to have ourselves a proper scrap. Behind him, other humans began moving with increased urgency. Lights on their bridge changed from blue to red. The steady hum of their engines shifted to a higher pitch. Whatever these humans were doing, they were preparing for battle. Colonel Thompson, Admiral Zorvak tried again. You are facing 3 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your single vessel cannot hope to match our combined firepower. I strongly advise surrender. Admiral, I appreciate the advice, I truly do. But here's the thing about Marines. We don't surrender. We attack. And right now, you've given us exactly what we've been hoping for since we left Earth. Captain Thexel watched his sensor displays with growing alarm. The human ship's energy signature was changing. Systems throughout their vessel were powering up, but not in any pattern he recognized. Their weapons were unlike anything in his experience. No energy buildup, no particle stream indicators, nothing that matched hegemony weapon signatures. Sir, Cretan called out. The human vessel is moving. New course. They're heading directly for us. Directly for us? Thexel couldn't believe what his sensors were telling him. Are they attempting to ram us? On the communication channel, Colonel Thompson was speaking to his crew over an open frequency. All stations, this is the Colonel. We have 3 hostile contacts, heavy cruiser class. Rules of engagement are weapons free. Let's show these alien boys what happens when they threaten a United States Marine. The human ship accelerated with surprising speed. Whatever propulsion system they used, it was more efficient than their primitive fusion signature suggested. But more disturbing was their trajectory. They weren't trying to escape or seek cover among the asteroids. They were charging straight at the center of the hegemony formation. This is insane, Captain Mordun transmitted. They're going to get themselves killed. Admiral Zorvak had seen enough. All ships, power weapons. Target the human vessel. We'll disable their engines and drag them in for proper interrogation. The 3 hegemony cruisers began charging their plasma cannon arrays. Energy fields around each ship glowed brighter as shield generators ramped up to full power. Whatever game these humans were playing, it was about to end. But Colonel Thompson wasn't finished talking. Admiral Zorvak, before we get started, I want you to know something. My species has been watching you for the last 3 years. We've studied your expansion patterns, your military tactics, your technology. We know all about your hegemony and your plans for our little blue world. The human ship was now close enough that visual sensors could make out details of its hull. The metal plating was scarred and pitted, suggesting it had seen combat before. Weapon ports along its sides began opening, revealing arrays of devices that looked nothing like conventional energy weapons. We know you think you're the toughest things in this galaxy, Thompson continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. We know you've conquered dozens of species and absorbed their worlds into your little empire. But here's what you don't know about humans, Admiral. We're not like those other species. We don't surrender, we don't beg for mercy, and we sure as hell don't roll over and play dead when someone threatens our home. Captain Thexel realized with growing horror that his tactical computer couldn't get a proper weapons lock on the human ship. It was moving too erratically, following no predictable pattern. Every time his targeting system calculated a firing solution, the human vessel changed course just enough to throw off the calculations. Sir, Cretan reported, their weapons are powering up, but I can't identify the energy signatures. They're not using plasma or particle beam technology. Then what are they using? Thexel demanded. Before anyone could answer, the human ship opened fire. The first projectile struck Captain Mordun's cruiser exactly amidships, punching through the energy shields as if they weren't there. The impact sent shockwaves through the massive vessel, causing lights to flicker and crew members to grab for support. What was that? Admiral Zorvak's voice cracked with disbelief. Kinetic impactor, Velnara reported from her analysis station. Solid projectile, approximately 200 kilograms, traveling at 15% of light speed. 15%? Thexel felt his blood turn cold. That's impossible. No primitive species has that kind of acceleration technology. The human ship fired again, and again. Each shot was perfectly aimed, striking different sections of the hegemony vessels with devastating precision. The energy shields that had protected them against every enemy they had ever faced were useless against simple chunks of metal, moving at relativistic speeds. Colonel Thompson's voice cut through their confusion like a blade. Welcome to human warfare, gentlemen. We hope you enjoy your stay. Captain Mordun's cruiser. Stellar Dawn shuddered under another kinetic impact. The bridge crew struggled to understand what was happening to them. Their shields, designed to deflect the most powerful energy weapons in the galaxy, might as well have been made of paper against these human projectiles. Damage report, Mordun shouted over the alarm klaxons. Hull breach on Deck 7, his engineering officer replied. The projectile went completely through the ship. Emergency containment. Fields are holding, but barely. Mordun stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human ship moved like nothing he had ever seen before. It didn't follow the standard patterns of civilized warfare. There were no formal battle lines, no predictable maneuvers, no attempt to minimize damage to either side. Instead, the human vessel darted between the 3 hegemony ships like an angry insect, It used the asteroids for cover, disappearing behind rocks, only to emerge from completely different angles. Worse, it seemed, to be using the gravitational fields of the larger asteroids to change direction without slowing down. How are they pulling those acceleration forces? Captain Thexel's voice crackled over the communication link. Our computers calculate they should be experiencing over 20 gravities in some of those turns. Unknown, Morden replied. But whatever technology they're using, it's letting them fly circles around us. The human ship, the Leatherneck according to its transponder, fired another volley. This time, Morden watched in fascination as the projectiles ricocheted off asteroid surfaces, using the impacts to change direction mid-flight. The shots came at his ship from 3 different angles simultaneously. They're using geometry, his tactical officer whispered in amazement. They're calculating ballistic trajectories that use the asteroids as guidance systems. Admiral Zorvak's flagship Galactic Harmony had taken the least damage so far, but that was about to change. The human ship seemed to have finished playing, with its smaller targets, and was now focusing its attention on the largest threat. All ships concentrate fire on that human vessel, Zorvak ordered. I don't care what kind of weapons they're using. There's still just one ship against 3. The hegemony cruisers opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams and particle cannons lit up the space around the Leatherneck with destructive energy. For a moment it looked like they had succeeded in overwhelming the primitive ship. Then the human vessel emerged from the plasma storm, completely unharmed. Impossible, breathed Captain Veltesh from the 3rd cruiser. Nothing could survive that kind of firepower. Colonel Thompson's voice came through their speakers, still calm and controlled. Nice light show, Admiral, but you might want to check your intelligence files again. Human ships aren't built like your pretty energy-absorbing hulls. We use something called armor. Old-fashioned, primitive armor designed to soak up kinetic damage and keep on fighting. The human ship demonstrated his point by performing a maneuver that should have been impossible. It flipped end over end while maintaining its forward velocity, bringing different weapon systems to bear on each of the hegemony ships simultaneously. Multiple launch detected, Creton reported from his sensor station. Dozens of smaller projectiles inbound. Captain Thexel watched the tactical display as a cloud of human missiles spread out across local space. But these weren't the simple kinetic rounds they had been facing. These projectiles had their own guidance systems, their own propulsion, their own target selection algorithms. Point defense systems, engage, he ordered. The hegemony ship's defensive weapons began tracking and destroying the incoming missiles. Laser arrays and particle beams swatted them out of space with practiced efficiency. It looked like they were successfully defending against this new threat, until the missiles started doing impossible things. Some of them used their own destruction as cover, hiding additional warheads in the debris clouds. Others split apart into multiple smaller projectiles that were harder to track. A few actually seemed to learn from the defensive fire patterns, changing their approach vectors to exploit gaps in the point defense coverage. Sir, Velnara called. Out. I'm detecting something disturbing about these human weapons. They're not just following pre-programmed flight paths. They're adapting their behavior in real time. Adapting how? They're learning from our defensive responses and modifying their attack patterns accordingly. It's like fighting 100 small artificial intelligences, each one trying to solve the puzzle of how to get past our defenses. Captain Thexel felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were terrifying. Most civilizations used guided weapons, but they followed predictable patterns. These human missiles were thinking, adapting, evolving their tactics even as the battle continued. Admiral, he transmitted to Zorvak, we need to reconsider our approach. These humans aren't fighting like any primitive species we've encountered. They're still just one ship, Zorvak replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. We have them outnumbered 3-1. The human ship proved him wrong by demonstrating why numbers didn't always matter. It had been using its superior maneuverability to ensure that the hegemony ships couldn't bring their full firepower to bear simultaneously. By staying in constant motion and using the local environment to its advantage, it effectively negated their numerical superiority. Even worse, the humans seemed to understand hegemony tactics better than the hegemony understood human tactics. Every time one of the cruisers moved to execute a standard flanking maneuver, the Leatherneck was already moving to counter it. Every attempt at coordinated fire was disrupted by precisely timed evasive action. "They've been studying us, Captain," Mordlin realized. "Colonel Thompson said they've been watching us for 3 years. They know how we fight. But we know nothing about how they fight." Thexel finished the thought. The human ship seemed to read their minds. Colonel Thompson's voice came through their communicators again, but this time he wasn't alone. Other human voices could be heard in the background, calling out technical information and tactical updates with professional efficiency. "Admiral Zorvak," Thompson said, "I think it's time we had a more serious conversation. You see, what you're experiencing right now isn't human military doctrine. This is what we call a skirmish. A small-scale engagement between scout forces." The words hit the hegemony commanders like physical blows. If this was just a skirmish, what would a real battle look like? "You want to know the difference between humans and all those other species you've absorbed?" Thompson continued. "Those species developed spaceflight so they could explore the galaxy, find new homes, spread their culture to the stars. Noble goals, every one of them. The Leatherneck executed another impossible maneuver, using the gravity well of a large asteroid to slingshot around and hit Captain Veltesh's cruiser from an unexpected angle. Humans developed spaceflight so we could figure out new and interesting ways to kill each other. We've been perfecting the art of warfare for 10,000 years. We've fought with sticks and stones, bronze and iron, gunpowder and nuclear fire. We've turned killing into a science, an art form, a professional calling. Captain Veltesh's ship, the Unity's Promise, took a direct hit to its main reactor housing. The ship didn't explode. The human projectiles were too precisely targeted for that. Instead, it simply went dead in space, all power systems offline. The thing about humans, Admiral, is that we don't just fight to win. We fight because we love fighting. We've spent millennia learning how to break things and kill people, and we've gotten very, very good at it. The tactical situation had shifted completely. What had started as 3 hegemony ships surrounding a single primitive vessel had become one human ship systematically dismantling 3 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. "Admiral," Thexel transmitted, "I recommend we withdraw and reassess the situation." But Admiral Zorvak had spent too many years as the undisputed master of this sector to accept defeat from a primitive species. "All ships, close to ramming, distance. If we can't destroy them with weapons, we'll crush them with mass." It was exactly the wrong order to give. Colonel Thompson's laugh echoed through their communications. "Ram us? Admiral, my species has been ramming things since we figured out how to tie a rock to a stick. You're about to learn why we got good at it." The human ship didn't flee from the approaching hegemony vessels. Instead, it accelerated directly toward Admiral Zorvak's flagship, its weapon systems charging for what could only be a final, devastating barrage. "Sir," Creton's voice was barely a whisper, "I'm reading massive energy buildup in their forward weapons array. Whatever they're about to fire, it's unlike anything we've seen before." Captain Thexel realized with growing horror that they weren't fighting a primitive species at all. They were fighting something that had evolved warfare into a perfect art form, and they were about to learn exactly what that meant. "All ships, emergency reverse thrust," he ordered, but he knew it was too late. The humans were about to show them what real weapons looked like. Admiral Zorvak watched the human ship approach his flagship and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine fear. The Leatherneck moved with predatory grace, its scarred hull reflecting the light of distant stars. Every line of its design spoke of violence perfected through generations of warfare. "Distance to target, 4,000 kilometers and closing," his tactical officer reported. "All weapons fire at will," Zorvak ordered. "Don't let that ship get any closer." The Galactic Harmony unleashed everything it had. Plasma cannons designed to crack planetary shields poured energy into the space around the human vessel. Particle beams that could slice through asteroid belts painted brilliant lines of destruction across the darkness. The firepower was enough to sterilize a small moon. The human ship flew straight through it all without slowing down. "How?" Zorvak whispered, "How are they surviving that?" His answer came from Intelligence Officer Texara, who had been analyzing the human ship's defensive systems. "Admiral, their armor isn't designed to deflect energy weapons. It's designed to absorb and redistribute thermal energy across the entire hull. Our weapons are actually making their armor stronger." The implications struck the bridge crew like a physical blow. Everything they knew about ship design, about weapons technology, about the fundamental principles of space warfare, was being proven wrong by this single primitive vessel. 3,000 kilometers, the tactical officer announced. Colonel Thompson's voice came through their communicators, still maddeningly calm. "Admiral Zorvak, before we finish this dance, I want you to understand something about human military doctrine. Every weapon you've seen so far, the kinetic rounds, the adaptive missiles, even our armor systems, those are what we call conventional weapons." The human ship's forward section began to glow with a different kind of energy. Zorvak's sensors detected massive power fluctuations, but not from any technology in their databases. But humans didn't stop at conventional weapons. Thompson continued. "We kept pushing the boundaries of destruction until we learned to harness the fundamental forces of the universe itself. We learned to split atoms, to fuse hydrogen, to turn matter into pure energy." Captain Thexel's voice crackled over the communication link from his damaged cruiser. "Admiral, are they talking about nuclear weapons?" "Nuclear?" Zorvak had heard the term in theoretical discussions, but no civilized species had ever been primitive enough to actually weaponize atomic forces. The risks were too great, the potential for catastrophic accidents too high. "Oh, we're talking about much more than nuclear weapons," Thompson replied, apparently monitoring their transmissions. "We're talking about controlled fusion detonations, antimatter containment breaches, and something we call a Kasaba howitzer. That last one is particularly interesting. It's a nuclear explosive designed to focus all of its energy in a single direction." The human ship was now close enough that visual sensors could make out details of its forward weapons array. What they saw defied comprehension. The entire front section of the ship was built around a single massive weapon system, something that looked more like a piece of industrial equipment than a military device. 2,000 kilometers, the tactical officer reported, his voice cracking with stress. "Admiral," Texara called out, "I'm detecting nuclear signatures throughout the human vessel. Not fusion reactors, actual weapons. They're carrying enough nuclear material to destroy everything in this system." The bridge of the galactic harmony fell silent except for the hum of failing systems. The concept was so alien, so fundamentally wrong, that it took time to process. What kind of species carried planet-killing weapons on their ships as standard equipment? 1,000 kilometers. Colonel Thompson seemed to sense their confusion. "You know what the really interesting thing is, Admiral? This isn't even a major warship by our standards. The Leatherneck is classified as a reconnaissance vessel in our fleet hierarchy. We use it for scouting and intelligence gathering." Captain Morden's voice joined the conversation from his crippled ship. "Reconnaissance vessel? This ship has more firepower than our entire battle group." "That's because you don't understand human military philosophy," Thompson explained. "Every human ship, from the smallest scout to the largest dreadnought, is designed to fight and win against superior numbers. We don't build ships that can't take care of themselves." The human weapons system reached full power. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the hegemony sensors were designed to measure. Whatever the humans were about to unleash, it was operating on principles that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had never even theorized about. 500 kilometers. Admiral Zorvak made a decision that went against everything he had learned in his decades of command. "All ships, full reverse thrust, emergency withdrawal from combat zone," but it was too late. The human ship had closed to optimal firing range. "Fire," Colonel Thompson said simply. The Kasaba howitzer detonated with the force of 50 megatons of nuclear fire, but instead of expanding in all directions, the blast was focused through a tungsten lens into a cone of pure destruction. The energy stream, compressed and directed with inhuman precision, struck the galactic harmony directly amidships. The result was not an explosion. It was annihilation. The focused nuclear fire punched through the hegemony flagship's bio-grown hull like it was made of paper. Decks that had housed thousands of crew members simply ceased to exist. Armor plating that had taken decades to grow was vaporized in microseconds. The ship's fusion reactors, overwhelmed by the energy cascade, began shutting down in sequence. Casualty report. Admiral Zorvak gasped, pulling himself up from where the shockwave had thrown him. 50% of the ship is gone. His damage, control officer reported in a voice filled with disbelief. Just gone. The weapon somehow carved out the entire center section without causing a reactor breach. We're alive, but we're not going anywhere. Similar reports came in from the other. 2 cruisers. Captain Thexel's Sovereign's Pride was missing its entire weapons section. Captain Morden's ship had lost its engineering deck. All 3 vessels were effectively dead in space. The human ship moved among the wreckage of the hegemony formation, like a shark among wounded fish. Its weapons remained powered, ready to deliver killing blows if necessary. But Colonel Thompson seemed content to let them consider their situation. "Admiral," he said, "I hope this has been educational. You've just experienced a small demonstration of why humans don't surrender, don't retreat, and don't negotiate from positions of weakness." Zorvak stared at his tactical display. The numbers made no sense. A single human ship had defeated 3 of the most powerful vessels in hegemony service without taking significant damage. It wasn't just impossible. It rewrote everything they thought they knew about warfare. "But here's the thing that should really concern you," Thompson continued. "Everything you've seen today, the kinetic weapons, the adaptive missiles, the nuclear fire, that's just one ship's worth of human technology. One reconnaissance vessel from a species that has been preparing for this moment for the last 3 years. Captain Thexel's sensors detected new contacts entering the system. But these weren't more human ships. They were hegemony reinforcements, responding to the distress signals. "You've got company coming, Admiral," Thompson observed. "Looks like someone called for backup. I count 15 ships? 20? That should be interesting." The approaching hegemony fleet consisted of 24 vessels from across the Third Fleet. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, support ships. Everything Admiral Zorvak could bring to bear against a single enemy vessel. It should have been overwhelming force. But Colonel Thompson didn't sound worried. If anything, he sounded pleased. "Admiral, I want you to do something for me. I want you to contact those reinforcements and tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them how a single human ship dismantled 3 of your best cruisers. Tell them about our weapons, our tactics, our capabilities." "Why would you want me to do that?" Zorvak asked. Thompson's laugh was cold and sharp. "Because I want them to know what they're getting into. I want them to understand exactly what kind of enemy they're about to face. And most importantly, I want them to spread the word throughout your entire hegemony about what humans are capable of." The reinforcement fleet was getting closer, moving in standard battle formation. Their commanders had no idea what they were flying into. "You see, Admiral, this whole encounter has been a test. We wanted to see how your military thinks, how your ships fight, how your crews react under pressure. And I have to say, we're not impressed." Colonel Thompson paused, letting his words sink in. "Your turn, Admiral. Time to make that call." Admiral Zorvak stared at the communication panel for several seconds before activating it. Around him, the bridge of the Galactic Harmony resembled a disaster zone. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across damaged equipment and injured crew members. The smell of burned biocircuits filled the recycled air. "This is Admiral Zorvak to all approaching vessels," he began, his voice heavy with defeat. "Reduce speed and maintain safe distance from the human ship. Do not, repeat, do not, engage the enemy vessel." Commander Kelthor's voice crackled through the speakers from the approaching cruiser Stellar Might. "Admiral, we rid you as heavily damaged. Are you under duress?" "Negative. I am giving you a direct order based on tactical assessment. The human vessel has capabilities far exceeding our initial estimates. 3 heavy cruisers have been neutralized with minimal damage to their forces. The silence that followed spoke volumes. In 3 centuries of hegemony expansion, no single alien ship had ever defeated multiple hegemony vessels in direct combat. The concept was so foreign, that many of the approaching commanders probably thought their admiral was suffering from combat trauma. Colonel Thompson's voice cut through their confusion. "This is Colonel Marcus Thompson, commanding the USMC Leatherneck, to all hegemony vessels in this system. You are hereby ordered to maintain position and prepare to receive a message intended for your entire command structure." Commander Kelthor responded with barely controlled anger. "This is a hegemony system, human. You have no authority here." "Commander," Thompson's voice took on a harder edge. 30 minutes ago, your admiral thought the same thing. I suggest you ask him how that worked out." Admiral Zorvak intervened before the situation could escalate further. "All ships comply with the human demands. Stand down weapons and maintain position." "Sir?" Kelthor's confusion was evident. "We outnumber them 24-1. Commander, that single human ship just destroyed the combat effectiveness of 3 heavy cruisers, using weapons we didn't even know existed. If you value the lives of your crews, you will follow my orders without question." The hegemony fleet reluctantly spread out into a defensive formation, weapons powered down but ready. 24 ships faced off against a single human vessel, in a standoff that would have been laughable under any other circumstances. Colonel Thompson seemed satisfied with the arrangement. "Thank you, Admiral. Now if you'll give me access to your fleet communications network, I have a message to deliver." "You want access to our military communications?" "I want to make sure every ship in your fleet hears what I have to say. More importantly, I want to make sure this message gets transmitted back to your Hegemony Council, your military command, and anyone else who might be interested in humanity's place in this galaxy." Admiral Zorvak hesitated. Giving an enemy access to military communications was against every protocol he had ever learned. But then he looked around his ruined bridge and realized that normal protocols no longer applied. "Communications, Grant. The human vessel access to fleet frequencies." "Channel open, sir." Colonel Thompson's image appeared on screens throughout the Hegemony fleet. Behind him, his bridge crew continued their work with professional efficiency. The contrast between the calm human environment and the damaged Hegemony ships was not lost on anyone watching. "To the officers and crew of the Hegemony Third Fleet," Thompson began. "My name is Colonel Marcus Thompson, United States Marine Corps, commanding the reconnaissance vessel Leatherneck. Over the past 4 hours, your fleet has engaged in combat with a human military unit. This engagement is now concluded." He paused, letting his words sink in across dozens of ships. "I want to be very clear about what just happened here. 3 of your heavy cruisers attempted to force the surrender of a single human vessel. This attempt was unsuccessful. The human vessel successfully defended itself using standard military doctrine and conventional weapons systems." Captain Thexel, listening from his damaged bridge, almost laughed at the word conventional. Nuclear weapons focused through tungsten lenses were hardly conventional by any reasonable definition. "Now I'm sure many of you are wondering why I'm taking the time to explain this," Thompson continued. "The answer is simple. We know about your plans for Earth. We know about your integration schedule. We know that your Hegemony Council has marked humanity for absorption sometime in the next century." The bridge crews across the fleet exchanged uncomfortable glances. That information was supposed to be classified at the highest levels. How had a primitive species gained access to hegemony strategic planning? "Here's what your council doesn't understand about humans," Thompson said, his voice taking on a conversational tone. "We've been watching your expansion for 3 years now. We've studied your military tactics, your technology, your psychology. We know how you think, how you fight, how you've managed to absorb dozens of civilizations without significant resistance." Human Colonel gestured to something off-screen, and his tactical display showed a detailed map of hegemony space. Every major fleet position, every military installation, every strategic resource was clearly marked. "The problem with your approach is that it's based on the assumption that all civilizations follow the same basic patterns. Primitive species are supposed to be afraid of advanced technology. They're supposed to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They're supposed to gratefully accept integration into your peaceful galactic community." Thompson's smile was cold and predatory. "Humans don't follow those patterns. We're not grateful for your peace. We're not intimidated by your technology. and we're certainly not interested in being absorbed into your hegemony. The tactical display shifted to show the Sol system in detail. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, surrounded by orbital installations that definitely hadn't been there 3 years ago when the hegemony scouts had last visited. We've spent the last 3 years preparing for your arrival, Thompson explained. We've built ships, trained crews, developed new weapon systems. We've turned our entire industrial capacity toward a single goal, making sure that when your fleets arrive at Earth, they receive the warmest possible welcome. The display showed hundreds of human ships in various stages of construction. Orbital shipyards worked around the clock, turning out vessels that looked nothing like the graceful bio-grown ships of the hegemony. These were crude, angular, heavily armored things that spoke of a species that had turned warfare into an industrial process. But here's the really interesting part, Thompson continued. We're not just preparing to defend ourselves. We're preparing to come looking for you. A new set of star charts appeared showing human exploration routes extending deep into hegemony space. Scout ships, reconnaissance missions, intelligence-gathering operations, all pointing toward a species that was actively studying their future enemies. You see, the thing about humans is that we don't just fight to win. We fight to completely and utterly destroy anything that threatens us. And your hegemony, with its plans to absorb our world and our people, definitely qualifies as a threat. Admiral Zorvak felt a chill run through his damaged ship. The implications were staggering. If the humans were already this advanced, if they had been planning and preparing for years, then the hegemony's casual assumptions about primitive species were catastrophically wrong. So here's what's going to happen, Thompson announced. This fleet is going to return to hegemony space. You're going to report everything you've seen here to your superiors. You're going to tell them about human weapons, human tactics, human capabilities. Most importantly, you're going to tell them that humanity is not interested in peaceful integration. The tactical display shifted one final time, showing detailed coordinates for dozens of human military installations, fleet bases, weapons testing, facilities, shipbuilding centers, all broadcast openly for the entire hegemony fleet to record. I'm transmitting these coordinates because we want you to know exactly where we are and what we're doing. We want your council to understand that we're not hiding, we're not running, and we're not afraid. We're right here, building more ships and training more crews, getting ready for the day when your fleets arrive at Earth. Thompson leaned forward, and his voice took on the tone of a predator making a promise. And when that day comes, when you bring your best ships and your finest warriors to our little blue world, you're going to discover something that every human child learns in school. There's nothing more dangerous in this universe than a United States Marine who's had time to dig in and wait for you. The transmission ended, leaving the hegemony fleet alone with their damaged ships and their shattered assumptions about the galaxy's natural order. Colonel Thompson had delivered his message. Now it was time to see what the hegemony would do with. In the distance, the human ship Leatherneck began its journey back toward Earth, leaving behind a fleet of advanced alien vessels that had just learned they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. The message would reach the hegemony council within days. The response would determine whether the galaxy's future would be shaped by peaceful absorption or by the most professionally violent species it had ever encountered. Either way, the humans would be ready.